Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan and welcome once again to the dark and brooding comic book vault. Joining me today is Deathgodstorm.
And you can just call me Steve because I don't like my username.
Oh, okay, alright, well I want to make sure everybody knew where to find you, Steve. And today Steve and I are going to talk about Hush, which is a major Batman story that I've never covered before. And considering I did No Man's Land a couple months ago, I thought this would be a cool thing to go ahead and cover since I've got it. And it's kind of the next big Batman story after No Man's Land. And Steve is a big Batman reader and collector and has made lots and lots of videos about Batman. And so and has been wanting to do a video with me for quite a while, so I thought this would be a cool place to go. Steve, what was it like going back reading this after not having read it in a while?
Well, I try to go back and read my Batman trades at least once or twice a year, and Hush has always been something I skipped because, have you read any of the new Gotham books that came right after No Man's Land?
I haven't. Mm-mm.
Okay, well, the moment No Man's Land ends, there's two trades, Officer Down and Evolution.
Oh, excuse me, I do have Officer Down. I didn't know what you meant when you said New Gotham.
Oh, no, yeah, there's just labeled New Gotham after No Man's Land stops and they rebuild the city. And,
I see. Yeah, I have read Officer Down, but I haven't read the other one.
Well, I never liked Officer Down. I never liked Evolution. Like, they just seemed extremely weak compared to No Man's Land, especially if you read the new paperbacks that they're printing. And when I first read Hush, I didn't like that either, so I just always skip over that little bit of Gotham history. So when I went back and started reading this, I just sat there and thinking that if you have any background knowledge of Batman whatsoever or have read anything remotely good from Batman, like, say, The Killing Joke or Dark Knight Returns, you don't need to read this. You can just jump right through this and you will miss nothing. Like, honestly, the only thing that comes out of play to this is that, we're doing spoilers, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, well, the only thing that comes out of play to this is the Riddler learns Bruce Wayne is Batman, and he forgets because of Infinite Crisis, so that doesn't matter. Catwoman learns Bruce Wayne is Batman, except they break up at the end, and that never comes back to haunt you. Tim Drake gets upset because he thinks Jason's alive. That never comes back to Tim Drake. And that's really about it for its major effects on Batman. I mean, Hush shows up, but Hush doesn't show up again until right before R.I.P. And that story doesn't really matter because R.I.P. was a bigger story.
And what's very strange about, the fact that Hush became kind of a regular recurring villain after this is that you almost don't have to read this to know much about Thomas Elliot and Hush because he's obviously the big villain in this, and we learn some stuff about Elliot, but by and large, he's sort of just a quick dossier like the rest of them. It seems like. I mean, like, the way this book is organized is characters kind of jump in and they make and like Loeb makes a really big deal out of their entrance. So it's like, oh, here comes Clayface, in big giant letters. Here he comes. Yeah. And they do that with really everybody. It seems like an excuse to get as many Batman characters in a 12-issue series. This was part of the regular Batman book, but in 12 issues as possible. And then what's weird is Hush bookends it. But then, at the end, his motivation is given so quickly that it feels like that quick character dossier that you got for all those other characters in case you didn't know who they were.
Yeah, and I've tried to go back and give it credit because in between the story, they do give, like, tiny flashbacks to Thomas Elliot and Bruce Wayne as a kid, which, by the way, I hate when they go back in the origin and say this happened right before Bruce Wayne's parents died. Because according to this, and if you count everything else by Batman, apparently it was Christmas, Halloween, Batman was listening to rock music while going to the opera, watching the Grey Ghost episodes, and playing with Thomas Elliot, whose dad just died right before his parents died.
So you have such an interesting perspective on this, because I've never read all that much Batman altogether like you have. So, like, you start putting together these continuity pieces that I think a lot of us who don't know as many things as you do wouldn't do. That's hilarious.
I try to be fair with this, because I think I'm being kind of harsh on it, but I think the thing with this is that it's definitely the observer effect where if you get a 2-year-old kid and an astronomer to stare outside into the sky and they both have 20/20 vision, they're going to see two totally different things because one's an astronomer, one's a kid. There's just different perspectives. When you get to this, I feel like if you have any perspective that isn't a fresh-eyed Batman perspective, you're going to find problems with this.
That is a very profound analogy, Steve. That's how I felt about it too, because the last time I really sat down and read this cover to cover was before I was as into current and as into comics as I am now. Of course, back then I think I thought I was a big Batman fan. You know what I mean? Like I because I read this shortly after it came out, so that was 8 or 9 years ago now, and I think I probably I had read bits of Nightfall and No Man's Land and like the big stuff, and so I think I thought I was an expert. And I'm not now going to call myself a Batman expert. I read what I read and I like what I like, and clearly you're much more of an expert than I am in Batman comic books. But going back and looking at like trying to remember what it was like reading Hush the first time, I had an entirely different experience than I did now. I mean, back then it was just like, oh, this is so cool, all these characters together at the same time, and every other page is this amazing splash page. And I mean, like, I certainly want to give it credit too. I don't think it's a terrible book. I just think that, like you said, if you have much perspective on Batman, it's a very strange read. But it's definitely a very fun read if you can read it like kind of one piece. I gotta say though, I appreciated it more after reading the letter that Loeb has at the beginning of this. He said two things that I thought were very, very honest and good statements to make. One of them was that he was talking about how he had first gone to Tim Sale to draw this book, and Tim Sale was working on something else, so he couldn't use him. Right. So they ended up going to Jim Lee, and he was saying that he wanted somebody like Tim Sale that could make his work look better than it really was. And I thought that was a really honest thing to say, because that's really, I think that's really true. Now, I love Long Halloween, and I think that's the best writing Jeff Loeb has ever done on anything that I've read from him.
Right, me too.
And so I'm not sure that he's even giving himself enough credit when he says that Tim Sale's artwork made that better than it was, because I think that is a good comic book script all by its lonesome. This, if anybody else had drawn it, or if somebody of much less caliber than Jim Lee had drawn it, it would not be as much fun as it is. And the other thing he said was that it was difficult for him to write in current continuity. He said that from the Batman work that he had done before, it was all kind of its own thing. It was all very kind of, it's almost, I don't want to say it's entirely like Miller, because I think that stuff really is continuous, and of course, Miller's Year One is continuous, but right. It kind of feels like all its own stuff, like that and Dark Victory and so, some of his other stuff kind of still feels like it's in its own continuity. He has to come in here and start writing within the regular Batman book.
I think that's interesting, mostly because Loeb, he's almost renowned for trying to do things that are major to a character. Like Long Halloween is the origin of Two-Face. Red Hulk was a big thing in Marvel. Dick Grayson shows up in Dark Victory. The anti-Bruce Wayne, Hush, shows up in this. And in all of those stories, that main character is either written really poorly or gets an extreme shaft. Like Dick Grayson is only in Dark Victory for maybe 2 issues at most. Two-Face hardly comes in when it comes to Long Halloween. It's more about the holiday killer. And in this, I found it really hard to narrow down a character for Hush, even though I know exactly who he was from the very beginning.
Yeah, as did I. And I thought that his motivation was very weak.
Yeah, and Paul Dini fixes that when he goes in for Heart of Hush and then Hush Money. But in this, it just seems, I don't understand. Like, they go out of their way to make him this amazing guy who plotted all of this, and by the end, the Riddler is the one who really plotted all of this. There's no reason that Hush has the skills to sneak up on Batman or put a bomb in his car or do anything. And the only motivation I can really find is that he wanted money, and that just seems so basic to go through all of this trouble.
Yeah, well, and that it's revenge based on wanting money because he wanted his parents dead. That's so strange. I mean, like, I can kind of, like, I think that he set things up okay in the idea that, like, he was, as a kid, he was impulsive and he was quick to get angry, and, like, he set all that kind of stuff up. So, he was a bit of a loose cannon, and you could kind of buy that maybe this kid would get to a point where he would kill his own parents, maybe. Kind of a Lex Luthor kind of thing, where like.
But I mean, not at age 9 or 10. I just didn't see that.
Maybe not. But much stranger was the fact that he wanted revenge so badly on Bruce Wayne for really something his parents did.
Exactly, and his parents were already dead. I mean, I don't understand what Bruce Wayne exactly had to do with this. I mean, if anything, Bruce saying that I promise that your parents will be okay and then them ending up not being okay would be something that brought those two closer together.
Yeah, exactly. And it's made much, much more absurd by the fact that it's so meticulously plotted. And it really does come off as just an excuse to get every Batman character Loeb could think of that he wanted Jim Lee to draw in a book.
Yeah, and I've heard people say that they're okay with the large amounts of characters because Jeff Loeb has a great take on all the characters. I disagree. I think Loeb has a really, really weak take on Batman, or at least in his dialogue. I don't like the romance with Catwoman. I don't like a lot of the cameo characters.
I don't like the fact, first of all, with Catwoman, I don't like the fact that it's left completely ambiguous as to whether or not that was a fixed thing that Riddler's plot was, created. I don't like the fact that by the end we don't know if they really were in love and were trying to get together finally or not. That kind of ambiguity is really irritating because now I don't know if it was real character motivation or not. And I think that it was just simply Loeb wanting to do that, but not having a good enough idea as to how to make it, okay, why would they finally start pursuing a romance this time?
Exactly. Like, if you know a little bit about Batman, you know Catwoman and Bruce Wayne have a little on and off again kind of thing because it's just kind of common knowledge at this point. But when you get into this book, it just seems extremely uncomfortable and out of character because if Selina Kyle is just randomly starting to kiss Bruce Wayne or Batman for no reason, and Batman keeps saying, well, all of my foes are acting out of character, wouldn't he by default think, well, Catwoman's working out of character, why should I trust her and tell her my secret identity?
My biggest complaint about this book is that Loeb dumbs Batman down to the point of absurdity. And because the thing is, it's a detective story, and Batman doesn't get to be a detective. He doesn't put anything together.
No, it just kind of comes out to him.
And that's not good. And again, Loeb tries to cover his tracks with all these things. He's not oblivious to this. Loeb's not unaware that these problems are there, and he does things to try to fix them, but the problem is that the way he really needed to fix them was come up with better ideas in the first place.
The premise just didn't exactly work with it.
Exactly. And so what we've got with Catwoman is like, okay, I really want to date Catwoman now, and she was a part of this as being a distraction, and so because of that, I can't figure anything out now. And I just don't buy that for Batman.
Exactly. And if we want to put this back in continuity again, where Bruce Wayne was at the end of No Man's Land and New Gotham was, he was really comfortable knowing that he had friends to help him out, like he had a Robin, he had a Nightwing, he had Oracle. He was getting depressed that he was more dependent on Oracle now, but he was at least more comfortable knowing that he had people. So I don't understand why now, all of a sudden, he would want a relationship with Catwoman and why that would change him so much.
Yeah, again, it might just be that he was manipulated, and so now he's at the end, he's like, okay, was I manipulated, was I not? And I really, really dislike this ending. I really dislike the very, very end with Catwoman.
Right, that.
Well, there's actually one big thing I don't like about the Riddler thing, which I'll say real quick since you said that, which is at least the way it reads in the trade I have, which is the the trade with all 12 of them together in one volume.
Right.
I don't know. I would assume that this was different if you read it in single issues. It might have been on a different page, but like they treat Riddler as a giant reveal.
They do. I think that's in all the versions of it.
Well, no, but what I was going to say is in the one I have, you see all those word balloons of his are coming off the page where you can't see them yet.
Right.
In my volume, in the one I have, that's all on the left side, and then he's on the right side. So as soon as you turn the page, you see him.
So you know it's him from the very beginning.
You know it's him as soon as you start reading all those dialogue balloons.
Right, and that just kind of kills it. And
so they shouldn't have printed it that way. And I mean, like maybe it's not that way in singles, so that's a moot point in criticizing the book itself. But I'm just saying that there was no shock factor there.
Well, really quickly to Riddler, I think Jeff Loeb confused who Riddler is and who Batman is, because I don't see how Riddler could be so smart as to figure all of this out. Like it's never explained. Like Bruce Wayne even goes back and says that the only people that know where Jason Todd is buried is Alfred and Batman. And to this point, Jason Todd wasn't alive yet. So how would Riddler know where he was even if he did hack the computer?
Yeah, I did not buy this bizarre idea of Riddler is the one who tells Thomas Elliot that Bruce Wayne is Batman. It seemed like it would have made a lot more sense if Thomas Elliot had somehow pieced it together.
Exactly, and Thomas Elliot isn't really even a character in this. He just kind of shows up and disappears for more than half of it, and all he does when he shows up is quote Aristotle.
Yeah, which was silly. In fact, I felt like Loeb was really struggling some with what to give characters to say, and fell back a lot on the obvious character motifs, the obvious gimmicks, which, to be fair, is somewhat thematic with the book, with what Riddler says at the end, where part of his motivation for this is, well, I was one of the first villains, and I had my cool gimmick, and now everybody has a gimmick, and I hate that. So I mean, like, he's talking a bit about these big, larger than life villain gimmicks where everybody has one, but I still think that it's kind of irritating that all of these villains come in and they've got to say those really trite kind of like, this is my gimmick kind of dialogue, especially Catwoman, just all over the place. Like there's one point where she says something and then she says, "Oh, that was catty," and I didn't like that line.
No, I didn't like that either, and they seem to do that a lot with Catwoman. We're giving her cat puns and things like that, and it just doesn't flow with her character. I mean, she's a cat burglar. She's not a person with a cat fetish.
You can do that sometimes. I mean, you can get away with it here and there, but I just feel like you lose some credibility when that's your fallback constantly. What I was going to say about the ending, about that final scene with Batman and Catwoman, is I didn't like the fact that Catwoman just broke the whole thing off, because she said the word hush, and that ticked Batman off. And I don't think she knew what she'd said.
And that just seems a little bit contrived, that out of nowhere Catwoman would just say hush and then try to kiss him. I mean, she's never done that before. She's never given him warning before she kissed him before. I don't understand where the word hush even came from in her mouth.
No, and it would have been okay had that happened maybe sometime earlier in the book or something, where before we even knew that was this character's alias. But this whole notion I thought was kind of strange, of constantly she would kiss Batman and he would keep asking her why she was doing it.
And they never really go back to it. Like, I don't know why Catwoman is infatuated with Batman in this story.
I really don't either. Not if you just take this as a standalone story, which you kind of ought to be able to. And, I feel like Loeb is going out of his way to make this a standalone Batman story.
See, I was confused about that, because when I was reading this, I wasn't sure who Loeb was writing to, because at the beginning of each issue, or at least what separates the issues, Batman goes over his origin or a character's origin or what's going on, so a new reader can jump in. But at the same time, he writes Catwoman as if you've known Batman's history all along. So I can't tell how that's supposed to work, and at the same time I can't tell how Batman's supposed to be, because the way he writes Batman's dialogue is that he never abbreviates his words. So everything just flows out of his mouth like he's a dictionary. So it's just extremely jarring when Batman speaks, and I can't tell if he has a personality or not.
Yeah, I can't either. And I'm with you. I don't think it's working, but I think he's trying really hard to make it to where anybody can pick this up. It's just that if you don't know any of these characters whatsoever enough to where every time one shows up, we need their origin in a text box right away, I'm not sure you can even begin to really enjoy this. Like you said that you have to kind of not have a long history with Batman to really appreciate this book, and I totally agree with you, but I think you at least have to know who Two-Face, Catwoman, and Joker are.
Right, like Two-Face comes out of nowhere in this. Like, I don't I know Batman history, and I don't understand how this Two-Face story works, because the way Two-Face...
How is it that, by the way, that changing his face just automatically gets rid of Two-Face?
It doesn't. Two-Face was a psychological thing. Like in Dark Knight Returns, when his face was fixed, he still saw himself as the crazy monster. It wasn't a scarring thing. It was just a psychological thing.
Yeah, and in the animated series, he develops that personality before he gets the scars.
Yeah, and at the end of the animated series, he has a third personality. I mean, it's just all psychological.
Right. And it's just perpetuated by the fact that now it's physical as well as mental.
And Gordon, because Gordon shows up at the end of this. Apparently Gordon was part of this whole plot carried out by the Riddler. I don't understand whatsoever what Gordon's point in this story would have been.
I don't either, because it's even explained how he got there in the first place.
But what would he have done if Riddler continued to manipulate him? What would he have done? Would he have shot Batman?
I have no idea. I mean, the only reason he was even involved was because for some reason Riddler's plot had him getting called by Thomas Elliot, I think, and then going to the scene when Batman was just about to kill the Joker. I also didn't buy, and tell me if you agree with this, I didn't buy that Thomas Elliot's supposed death would be enough to push Batman over the edge to kill the Joker after all the times that he didn't.
I got the sense that when they got to that issue that they were trying to do the Nightfall story where Bruce Wayne is just dealing with so much stuff and he's so stressed that he might come to the point of killing the Joker, but I still didn't buy it because I didn't care about Thomas Elliot. They never went out of their way to explain what Thomas Elliot and Bruce Wayne's relationship was enough like.
They were trying to make it much, much more important than it made sense to be. And again, once again, constantly Loeb trying to cover his tracks. He's got a place where he has, I want to say, it was either Dick or Tim, I think it was Dick, where he was asking somebody, have you ever heard Bruce talk about this guy before?
Yeah, that was probably Dick and Barbara, and they never said anything.
Mentions this guy ever. So Loeb again trying to cover his tracks, which is, well, Bruce has never talked about him before, but he really is really important. I needed this guy to exist in continuity before this, if all of this was gonna work out the way it did. And the other thing too is I think that he telegraphs who the person is behind all this far too early. Because
right.
I don't know, from as many stories, especially comic book stories that I've read, if I see a flashback with a guy that I've never seen before, and it's a flashback with these two kids as kids, or with these two guys as kids, and they're playing a game, and the very first thing you see this new character that you didn't know say to your protagonist is, I'm going to kill you?
Yeah, it follows that same formula where you introduce a new character at the same time writing a mystery story.
Exactly. And so again, Loeb's covering his tracks. He goes, well, you think he's dead. I don't think we ever think he's dead.
No, I mean, it didn't even look like he was dead when he was lying there. It obviously looked like there was some kind of plan there.
And that was the one place where for a minute I thought Batman was actually being regular Detective Batman and making sense and being objective and taking himself out of all this personal stuff. When he says to Catwoman in the Batcave, well, the Joker didn't kill him. Like, clearly the Joker didn't actually kill him. And I'm like, okay, well, first of all, I really think that you could have kind of gathered that from the scene itself and you wouldn't have had to, try to kill or think about killing the Joker. I really think that he could have gathered that. But even beyond that, when I was reading it, I thought he was meaning not only did Joker not kill him, but he wasn't dead. And he never picked up on that.
Right. And the thing with the Joker is, as soon as the Joker shows up, all he is thinking about is what all the horrible things the Joker has done. So it kind of makes me wonder, does Batman go crazy every time he sees the Joker? Because the Joker didn't even do anything yet.
Yeah. Is it every single time? And that brings us, I'm glad you said that, to, I think a really important point about this, which is, this book is very self-important.
Right. It tries to be this epic Batman tale uniting all the villains and creating this grand plot that destroys Batman, but it never does.
And it would be fine if it went there. I mean, if we actually bought it going there. But again, it really seems like just an excuse for Jim Lee to draw everything in Batman continuity ever. I was surprised Nightfall wasn't in here anywhere.
Yeah, something like that.
Well, I'm just saying because No Man's Land was kind of a big deal for this book. The death of Jason Todd was a big deal for this book. The introduction of Tim Drake, all of the backstory with Two-Face. I mean, there are a bunch of quick flashback images to other books that Jim Lee gets to draw in this. Yeah,
the Killing Joke stuff. He gets to draw a lot of these iconic panels, but they don't ever amount to anything.
And again, I think that a lot of the reason that this book, you were telling me before we started recording that when this book came out, it was getting mostly favorable reviews. And I really think a lot of that has to do with the artwork. I mean, I think that Jim Lee was able to draw this in such a way where it feels better than it really is.
Well, on the back of my trade paperback, it doesn't even really mention Jeff Loeb. It just says, praise for the most eagerly awaited collaboration in comics history, and just starts talking about Jim Lee.
Well, there you go. And let me ask you this question. How many of these panels, especially the full-page splashes, have you seen made as posters?
Almost every single one. If you go back and watch Batman documentaries or just comic documentaries in general, they use these exact panels with Bruce Wayne's parents dying or Nightwing and Batman running on the rooftop or anything.
I know that at least a couple of these covers I have posters of. I know that the first big Batman Catwoman kiss in this was everywhere.
Yeah.
And the one of the images of Batman and Superman fighting is kind of a big thing now.
Yeah, all of it is. And at the end of the story, Superman shows up and starts talking to Batman, and Batman says, "Thank you." Superman was not a big part of this story. I don't understand where that scene comes from either.
He didn't do anything except save Lois when he dropped him off a roof, which, by the way, that was really out of character for Batman.
That was. Batman. A lot of this was Batman out of character. He endangered the lives on that plane. He endangered Lois's life. He fought underneath the Daily Planet building. Batman doesn't do stuff like that.
It's also really inconsistent because, I feel like we're being a lot harsher on this book than I meant to. But I'm thinking of more stuff as we're talking about it. Batman's also very inconsistent in characterization in a couple places that you just mentioned.
Right.
The same guy that would bring a kryptonite ring to Metropolis just in case would not also let Catwoman drop Lois off a roof and then tell Superman, "I knew it would be okay because I believe in you."
Exactly. That's not Batman at all. And when you get into other stuff like
but even if he's doing a characterization that's slightly different from Batman, it's not even the Batman he was writing here.
Exactly. Like it's not consistent whatsoever. When you get to stuff like Ra's al Ghul, and you have that almost love triangle that they try to force on with Talia al Ghul and Catwoman and Batman, that doesn't work either because Ra's al Ghul has a deep respect for Batman. So in this, when Batman just starts showing up swinging blades and fighting dirty, Ra's al Ghul doesn't say anything about it. Talia doesn't say anything about it. It doesn't seem to match up with anything.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's one line that I think really sums up Loeb just not getting Batman in this story. And I don't want to come out and say Loeb doesn't get Batman. I've read other Loeb stories where I thought that he got Batman more than he does here.
I'm going to say he doesn't get Batman anymore.
Okay, fair enough. You mean like post Dark Victory or?
Post Long Halloween.
Okay. Oh, even post Long Halloween. All right.
Yeah, Long Halloween's the only thing I've ever written by him that was Batman and it was good.
Well, I'm not saying Dark Victory is great. My problems with that don't have as much to do with his characterization as they do just with the fact that Dark Victory just feels like Long Halloween all over again.
Yeah, it was Long Halloween all over again, just a different title.
But, because I never liked this, I know we're not reviewing that book, but I never liked the idea that it would take Batman an entire year to figure out a plot twice.
No, that's not Batman again.
It's my biggest problem with it. But anyway, with this, there's one line that really sums it up for me, and that's when Batman starts fighting mind wiped Superman.
Right.
And he says in his internal monologue that Superman deep down is a good person, and deep down I'm not.
Yeah, that's not something that Batman would say.
And it doesn't make sense, because I mean, like, the question is that Batman not understanding himself, or is that Loeb not understanding Batman? Because if Loeb really thinks that, why doesn't Batman just kill people?
Exactly. Like, he was going to kill the Joker. It wasn't even Batman saying, "I should just kill you." He was going to kill Joker if Gordon didn't show up, and that's not Batman either. And he endangers people's lives on purpose because he's emotional. Batman doesn't get emotional. If anything, people hate him because he's not emotional.
Well, and there were a number of points in this that because we had all this manipulation going, I always wondered, well, is he on fear gas? Is it some other kind of mind manipulation? You never know. And I think that
they even make the point that he might be on something when Scarecrow was talking to him, and they never addressed that again.
Precisely. The fact that there's no payoff means that Loeb planted those things in there so that when people like you and I started really thinking about it, we might go, oh, well, maybe he was on something and move on. But you can't do that.
No, you can't.
So that was really problematic. I also thought that there were some places in this book that were really kind of indulgent with and taking odd liberties with things that, since this is supposed to be mainstream continuity, I wasn't real sure that some of the things that he was writing, it was really fair for him to say. For instance, and maybe, because I wasn't reading Superman at this point, so maybe this was an idea that was played up in some of those books, but I highly doubt it. He's got this line in here where Bruce Wayne says that he doesn't buy that Perry White, at this point, being such a good reporter, wouldn't have figured out that Clark Kent is Superman. And he compares it to Jim Gordon, because of course Gordon, Batman thinks knows that he's Batman, and that's dealt with in No Man's Land.
Right.
And Gordon probably knows he's Batman, but he never addresses it. He lets the facade sit. And I like the idea of Perry White doing that. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think it was Loeb's place to bring that up.
Right. I mean, he's not the head Superman writer. If anything, when Lex Luthor's present and Superman's life's falling apart, it should be the Superman writer who does something that continually big. And if you're reading Batman and Superman at the same time, you might be sitting there wondering, well, if Perry White knows the whole time, then why is he doing this in this scene? It doesn't really match up.
So that's a minor point, but I didn't think that was fair.
I do want to give the book a tiny bit of credit. And sure. That's the tiniest thing I can give it is the issue where Tim Drake shows up. And Batman gives him credit by saying, when he's mentioning The Lonely Place of Dying book, and he says, Tim Drake figured out who I was, and he will be the world's greatest detective at some point. That was really characteristically Batman. Like, every time Tim Drake shows up, that is what Tim Drake's like.
I liked that too, and I like getting something like that in internal monologue that he would never say to the character.
Exactly. Like, I like Batman complimenting people when they're not around, or even not to their face. But at the same token, Tim Drake was trained by Lady Shiva. Are you telling me that Tim can't force Catwoman to do something? And Lady Shiva beat Catwoman horribly in this. Yeah,
that's a great point. I didn't think of that. I didn't like the way that they characterized Tim and Catwoman either, because it felt... A lot of it just felt like Loeb assigning people opinions, not necessarily based on anything. Because I wondered, okay, if Tim is so anti-Catwoman, why isn't Alfred?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just asking, like, maybe there's something precedented there that I'm not thinking of, or that I don't know about. But really, this bit where Alfred's like, where she says, I don't think anything of you, and it's an okay scene. I kind of liked it. I just wasn't sure about it after Tim, because he says, on the contrary, I think the world of you, and you need to keep doing what you're doing because we all like Batman better now that he's with you. That was all fine with me until Tim Drake comes in and is like, I hate Catwoman, and like just keeps lunging at her.
Exactly. I mean, I know the whole scene was an act, but that's still not something Tim Drake would go along with or even do.
That's true. That was an act. But the thing is, it was an act in the scene, but then he backtracks by having Batman talk about how Tim Drake, when he first told him about it, was really against it.
Yeah, and even Dick Grayson shows up and brings it up, and Batman says that it's not his place to talk about it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I like how he's writing the banter between Batman and his friends like Oracle, Nightwing, and Tim Drake, even though I hate Batman's dialogue. It's just, none of it seems to match up with his characterizations.
But we're at a half an hour. I think we should go ahead and wrap this up. I think that this is a really fun read. It just doesn't make a lot of sense in a lot of places.
I still think I'm going to go back to the analogy I had before with it depends on your perspective. Like, if you are a big Batman guy, I don't think you should read this. But yeah, I guess it is kind of fun depending on who you are. I've seen people who first read this in issues and still give it good reviews, saying that it is a good fun read and it introduces a lot of people to characters and backstories they didn't know before, so I guess that's fine. But the more exposure you have to Batman, the more you know about the characters, this becomes less and less important.
That's true. Another problem also is the deal with Jason Todd, because I was always in the camp that felt like if they knew at this point that maybe later on they really would bring Jason Todd back, I kind of wish that they'd just done it, that they just left it this way and let that be Jason Todd since he came back via Lazarus Pit.
Right, and I liked Jason Todd's introduction in the book, and I liked the fake out with Clayface, but then they go out and with Batman as Crows Flies and say that Bruce was already investigating Jason Todd's death, and then they have Under the Red Hood and Tales of the Red Hood where they say, well, even Ra's al Ghul knew Jason Todd was back. If all that's true, then why is Batman so mad when he's fighting Jason in the graveyard?
Yeah, and why did we have to do it through Superboy Punch? Why couldn't it have just been a Lazarus Pit all the time?
I mean, it would make perfect sense, and Ra's al Ghul's the kind of person who would do that. I mean, Under the Red Hood, the movie explained it a lot better than the comic ever did.
Yeah, and keep in mind, of course, that was Judd Winnick writing it the way he always wanted to.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of these Batman stories are just editorial mandates that want, like, fake outs with Jason Todd and stuff, because I don't think Loeb is that bad of a writer. It's just, he was working with Jim Lee, and Jim Lee was only going to be on Batman for 12 issues, so they needed some kind of contrived story where all the characters show up.
Yeah, and this also I felt like was a little bit of Loeb just kind of doing what he knew how to do with Long Halloween, because, you know, it's not a coincidence that it's 12 issues and that we have all of Batman's rogues gallery in this.
Exactly. Dark Victor is the same way, Long Halloween the same way, Haunted Nights was still the same way.
Did he do that in 12 issues too?
Well, that wasn't 12 issues, that was 3 really long issues.
Oh, okay. Okay, I haven't read that one.
It's alright. But yeah, I don't really recommend reading this. It's just... I think the more you think about it, even if you don't know Batman, it's not very good, and if you know Batman, it's even worse.
Well, and I'm still gonna go as far as saying if you've never read Hush, I recommend looking at it.
You mean buy the poster book?
I guess so, yeah, because I can't imagine not looking at this book, you know? I mean, because it's really pretty.
And it's iconic. They have a lot of these big panels that they've been using for like the past 5 or 6 years now, so you're gonna run into it eventually.
Yeah, I mean, at least art-wise, I don't think you can dismiss this as not important. I think you're right that story-wise, I think it set some things up that were used later, and so I think that the book is kind of technically important. It's just that you can read the things that it informed, and they're better, and you don't need to have read it. But I don't think that makes it, by and large, historically unimportant.
Yeah, I guess I can agree with that. To be fair, the way they were trying to plan out this story, they didn't have an exactly idea what they wanted to do anyway. They just kind of got an assignment to the book and said, well, Jim Lee's drawing it, Jeff Loeb's writing it, what do you know how to do? So it's not exactly they had years and years planning an epic Batman tale. Well,
that's a good point too.
Yeah. But again, to be fair, it doesn't really matter what happened outside of the book that informed it. What matters is that this is the book, and the end result still isn't very good, no matter how you look at it.
No, that's absolutely true. Yeah, absolutely. Well, everybody, thanks a lot for listening to the Comic Book Vault, and thanks a lot for joining me, Steve.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, come back again. We'll do another Batman thing.
Awesome.
And everybody, once again, thanks for listening. And if there's anything you'd ever like to send to the Comic Book Vault for me to review, you can always send that to our P.O. Box. That's Geekvolution, P.O. Box 14183, Lenexa, Kansas 66285. Don't forget to vote in the mock presidential election on Monday, and I'll be doing a live show in the evening with the results and fun talking to people back and forth for a couple hours. So look forward to that. Thanks again for watching. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Deathgodstorm or Steve, whatever you want to call me.
And we'll see you next time.